has confirmed it's launched an attack on Iran.
Tonight, the Middle East stands closer to the edge than it has in decades. Sirens echo across cities that never truly sleep. Fighter jets cut through the darkness, and missiles travel hundreds of kilometers in minutes, leaving governments scrambling and civilians waiting for the next alert. What began as rising tension behind closed diplomatic doors has now erupted into open confrontation, with Israel, the United States, and Iran exchanging strikes that are reshaping the balance of power in real time. In the past few days, waves of attacks and counterattacks have unfolded faster than official statements can keep up. Explosions reported near military installations, air defense systems activated across multiple countries, and emergency meetings taking place through the night suggest something far bigger than a limited operation. Analysts are calling it the most dangerous escalation in years, yet no one seems certain where the red line actually lies anymore. Military sources speak of precision strikes aimed at strategic targets, while regional media describe retaliatory launches crossing borders almost immediately afterward. Videos spreading online show flashes in the sky, interceptor missiles rising from urban areas, and distant shockwaves captured on mobile phones. Governments confirm some events, deny others, and remain silent about many more. In modern warfare, information moves almost as fast as the weapons themselves, and separating truth from speculation has become part of the battlefield. What makes this moment especially alarming is not just who is involved, but how interconnected the conflict has become. A strike in one country triggers alerts in another. Naval forces reposition overnight. Airspaces close without warning. Oil markets react within minutes. Behind every reported explosion lies a chain reaction that could pull additional players into the confrontation, intentionally or by accident. Gone further than any side originally intended. History shows that conflicts rarely expand all at once. Instead, they grow through rapid decisions made under pressure, misread signals, and retaliation cycles that become impossible to pause. And while officials speak about deterrence and security, millions of ordinary people across the region are now living under uncertainty, checking news updates before dawn, listening for sirens, and wondering whether the next strike will remain military or spill into something far wider. So what exactly has happened during these first critical days of strikes? Who fired first? Who responded? And what targets were really hit? Are these controlled military exchanges, or the opening phase of a conflict that could redefine global stability? In this video, we break down the timeline of the attacks, the scale of the bombardments, and the signals hidden behind official announcements. Because understanding what is happening now may explain what comes next, and why the world is watching this confrontation with growing concern. The opening phase of the strikes unfolded with a speed that caught even seasoned military observers off guard. In the early hours before dawn, reports began emerging of coordinated aerial activity over western Iran, followed minutes later by powerful explosions heard across several provinces. Residents in Tehran described the sound of distant shock waves rolling through the city shortly after midnight, while air defense systems were visibly activated in the sky. According to official statements released later, the operation was aimed at military infrastructure connected to missile production and command coordination, marking one of the most extensive direct attacks on Iranian territory in recent years. Initial satellite imagery analyzed by international monitoring groups appeared to confirm damage near known military zones outside Tehran and Isfahan. Western defense officials suggested that precision-guided munitions were used to avoid large-scale civilian casualties, although local media reported temporary power outages affecting entire districts after key energy distribution points were hit. Flights were abruptly rerouted across the region as neighboring countries began closing sections of their airspace, signaling that governments feared immediate retaliation. Witness accounts described interceptor missiles launching almost continuously for nearly 40 minutes, illuminating the night sky. Videos circulating online showed multiple flashes followed by delayed thunder-like sounds, consistent with high-altitude strikes. Some analysts believe the attacks were carried out in several synchronized waves, rather than a single operation, possibly involving long-range aircraft supported by naval assets positioned outside Iranian airspace. Unconfirmed regional sources claim that electronic warfare systems disrupted radar coverage minutes before the first explosions, temporarily blinding local defenses and allowing incoming projectiles to reach their targets with minimal interception. Among the primary objectives reportedly struck were logistics centers believed to store advanced drone components and missile guidance technology. Iranian authorities acknowledged that several military facilities sustained damage, but insisted that critical nuclear infrastructure remained operational. However, intelligence commentators pointed to unusual emergency movements observed near certain secured complexes, suggesting that sensitive equipment may have been relocated shortly before the strikes began. One widely discussed but unverified claim alleged that underground tunnels connecting multiple command facilities were partially collapsed after penetrating munitions struck reinforced entrances, an indication that attackers possessed highly detailed intelligence about internal layouts. As the night progressed, additional explosions were reported hundreds of kilometers apart, reinforcing the impression of a carefully planned campaign designed to overwhelm response capabilities. Maritime tracking data showed increased activity from foreign naval vessels in nearby waters earlier that evening, leading some experts to speculate that cruise missiles may have been launched from sea-based platforms. Iranian air defenses reportedly intercepted several incoming objects, and state television later broadcast images of debris said to belong to downed drones, though independent verification remains limited. Perhaps the most dramatic moment came shortly before sunrise, when emergency services were dispatched to a large military communications hub after what officials described as a direct aerial incident. Local journalists claimed the blast temporarily disrupted encrypted communications used by regional command units, forcing backup systems to activate. At the same time, social media users reported sudden internet slowdowns across major cities, fueling speculation that cyber operations accompanied the physical attacks. Despite the scale of the bombardment, the strikes appeared deliberately time-limited. Within hours, attacking aircraft were believed to have withdrawn, and no immediate follow-up assault was confirmed. Military analysts interpreted this as a signal operation, powerful enough to demonstrate reach and capability, yet restrained enough to avoid triggering uncontrollable escalation in the first phase. Still, the psychological impact was undeniable. Sirens, emergency broadcasts, and visible damage transformed what had long been a shadow confrontation into open military exchange. By morning, smoke rising above targeted areas became the defining image broadcast worldwide. Governments issued urgent statements, financial markets reacted instantly, and security forces across the Middle East moved to heightened alert levels. Whether intended as a warning, a strategic setback, or the opening move in a broader campaign, the first wave of strikes fundamentally changed the dynamics of the confrontation, setting the stage for the retaliatory attacks that would soon follow. As details of the initial bombardment began to emerge, attention quickly shifted toward the specific targets chosen during the coordinated strikes. Military analysts noted that the attacks appeared far more selective than a conventional bombing campaign, suggesting that planners prioritized strategic disruption rather than widespread destruction. Among the confirmed locations affected were facilities long associated with Iran's missile development network, including production and storage areas believed to support ballistic and drone programs. Satellite imagery released in the hours following the operation indicated structural damage near complexes outside Natanz, a site internationally known for its connection to Iran's nuclear activities, though officials emphasized that heavily fortified underground sections remained intact. Defense sources familiar with regional security assessments stated that the strikes focused on command and control infrastructure used by senior military leadership to coordinate operations beyond Iran's borders. Communication centers, radar installations, and logistics depots reportedly sustained direct hits, temporarily complicating internal coordination. Observers pointed out that several explosions occurred within minutes of one another, despite the significant geographic distance between targets, reinforcing the theory that advanced targeting intelligence had been gathered over months, if not years. Some experts suggested that reconnaissance drones may have monitored activity patterns beforehand to identify moments of peak operational vulnerability. Particular attention was drawn to attacks on facilities linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, widely regarded as one of the most influential military institutions in the country. Iranian authorities acknowledged damage to certain bases but described losses as limited, insisting that operational readiness remained unaffected. Nevertheless, regional monitoring organizations recorded unusually heavy emergency traffic moving toward affected areas, fueling speculation that casualties among senior officers may have been higher than publicly admitted. Unconfirmed reports circulating among defense correspondents claimed that at least one underground coordination bunker used for regional operations lost power following a precision strike that penetrated reinforced protective layers, an indication of specialized bunker-penetrating weaponry. Another significant objective appeared to involve Iran's growing drone manufacturing capability. Over recent years, unmanned aerial systems have become central to modern warfare in the region, and several targeted sites were believed to assemble navigation modules and propulsion components. Analysts argued that disabling these production hubs could slow Iran's ability to sustain prolonged retaliatory operations. According to regional intelligence leaks that remain unverified, one strike allegedly destroyed a newly constructed testing hangar capable of launching multiple long-range drones simultaneously, a facility that had reportedly completed trial operations only weeks earlier. Energy and infrastructure nodes were also indirectly affected. While not officially listed as primary targets, nearby electrical substations experienced outages shortly after the strikes, causing temporary blackouts across industrial zones. Some experts believe these disruptions were intentional secondary effects designed to complicate repair efforts and delay military recovery. Cybersecurity researchers additionally reported unusual digital interference coinciding with the attacks, suggesting that cyber operations may have disrupted internal monitoring systems moments before impact. Though governments involved have not confirmed such actions, synchronized technical failures strengthened suspicions that the operation extended beyond traditional air power. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the strikes involved alleged attempts to neutralize high-ranking figures connected to strategic planning. Iranian media denied claims that senior leadership was directly targeted, yet international observers noted emergency security measures implemented around government districts immediately afterward. Convoys were reportedly moved under heavy protection, and several scheduled public appearances were abruptly canceled. One widely discussed but unconfirmed account suggested that a meeting involving multiple defense officials had been relocated hours before a nearby facility was struck, raising questions about possible intelligence penetration or intercepted communications. Despite the intensity of the operation, the selection of targets appeared calculated to send a message rather than initiate total war. Weapons were reportedly chosen for precision impact, minimizing large-scale urban destruction while demonstrating the ability to reach deeply protected locations. Military commentators described the strikes as an attempt to degrade operational capacity without provoking immediate full mobilization. Still, the psychological effect was profound. By hitting installations tied to missiles, drones, and command networks, the attackers signaled that no layer of strategic infrastructure was beyond reach. As daylight revealed damaged compounds, scorched runways, and shattered administrative buildings, it became clear that the second phase of the confrontation had moved beyond symbolic warnings. The focus on military and technological assets showed an effort to reshape the battlefield before retaliation could fully organize, setting conditions that would influence every subsequent exchange of fire in the rapidly escalating conflict. In the hours following the initial strikes previously described, the conflict entered a far more volatile phase as new waves of bombardments expanded both in scale and intensity. Overnight, additional explosions were reported across multiple Iranian regions that had not been affected during the first operation, indicating that the campaign was evolving rather than concluding. Defense observers noted that the pattern of attacks shifted towards sustained pressure instead of singular precision actions. Air defense activity remained visible for much of the night, and regional monitoring stations recorded repeated aerial incursions approaching from different directions, suggesting coordinated timing intended to stretch interception capabilities. Iranian emergency authorities confirmed damage to transportation corridors used for military logistics, including rail junctions and storage facilities supporting equipment movement between provinces. While officials emphasized that civilian infrastructure was not deliberately targeted, secondary impacts disrupted nearby residential zones, forcing evacuations in several industrial districts. What made this stage particularly alarming was the tempo of repeated strikes occurring within relatively short intervals. Analysts tracking open-source flight data observed unusual aerial refueling patterns over international waters, implying that long-range aircraft were maintaining operational presence longer than initially expected. Several defense experts proposed that the objective was to prevent rapid reconstruction of previously damaged systems by striking replacement equipment as it was moved into position. Reports also emerged of explosions near mountainous areas, believed to host concealed launch platforms, fueling speculation that intelligence assets had identified mobile missile units attempting relocation. One unverified but widely discussed claim suggested that a convoy transporting advanced guidance systems was intercepted minutes after departing a secured facility, highlighting how quickly battlefield intelligence was being translated into action. By the second day, visible signs of strain appeared across Iran's defensive network. Air raid warnings were issued in cities that had not previously experienced alerts, creating widespread uncertainty among civilians. Telecommunications disruptions were intermittently reported, and some regional broadcasters temporarily switched to emergency programming. Military commentators suggested that the continued bombardments were designed not only to damage infrastructure, but also to impose psychological pressure, forcing defensive forces into constant readiness without predictable pauses. Satellite heat signatures detected near several airfields indicated fires that burned for hours after impact, pointing to possible fuel storage losses, although officials released limited confirmation. The situation dramatically escalated when Iran initiated large-scale retaliatory strikes, transforming the confrontation into an openly reciprocal exchange. Missile launches were detected shortly after sunset, with trajectories directed toward Israeli territory as well as locations hosting American military personnel across the region. Air defense systems activated across Israel almost simultaneously, and residents reported multiple interception attempts visible above major urban areas. Authorities confirmed that several projectiles were neutralized mid-air, though debris caused localized damage in peripheral zones. Emergency services responded throughout the night as sirens forced millions into shelters, marking one of the most extensive alert periods in recent memory. At the same time, American-operated installations in parts of the Persian Gulf entered high alert status, following warnings of incoming threats. Defense officials acknowledged attempted strikes targeting military bases used for logistics and surveillance operations. While most incoming missiles were reportedly intercepted, at least one installation sustained limited structural damage after fragments impacted support buildings. Regional governments temporarily suspended civilian flights, and commercial shipping routes adjusted course amid fears that maritime assets could become secondary targets. A senior security analyst described the retaliation as carefully calibrated, large enough to demonstrate reach, yet dispersed across multiple locations to complicate defensive planning. Adding to the tension was the growing involvement of allied armed groups aligned with Iran. Rocket fire originating from areas near Israel's northern border intensified, prompting counterstrikes aimed at launch positions believed to be responsible. Cross-border exchanges rapidly expanded, creating overlapping fronts that increased the risk of miscalculation. Residents in border communities reported sustained artillery activity through the night, while military spokespersons emphasized efforts to contain escalation geographically. Nevertheless, observers warned that each additional participant increased unpredictability, as localized clashes risked triggering broader responses. As exchanges continued, the geographic scope of the conflict widened beyond the immediate participants. Regional airspaces closed in succession, and several neighboring countries reinforced defensive readiness, amid fears that stray projectiles or navigational errors could cross into their territory. Energy infrastructure became a growing concern after reports surfaced of attempted drone incursions near offshore facilities supplying global oil markets. Although damage remained limited, even the possibility of disruption sent commodity prices sharply upward. Financial markets reacted within hours, reflecting concern that prolonged hostilities could destabilize international supply chains. Diplomatic reactions unfolded alongside military developments, though they struggled to keep pace with events on the ground. Emergency sessions convened at international organizations called for restraint, yet neither side signaled willingness to halt operations immediately. Behind the scenes, intermediaries reportedly attempted to establish communication channels aimed at preventing strikes on densely populated areas. One diplomatic source, speaking anonymously, claimed that unofficial warning mechanisms were being used to notify opposing forces before certain operations, an effort to avoid catastrophic civilian casualties while allowing both sides to maintain strategic messaging. Though impossible to independently confirm, the relative limitation of urban devastation compared to the scale of military activity lent some credibility to the notion of controlled escalation. Meanwhile, information warfare intensified almost as rapidly as the physical conflict. Competing narratives emerged regarding the effectiveness of strikes, casualty numbers, and operational success. Governments released carefully framed footage showing interceptions and defensive achievements, while independent analysts attempted to verify claims through satellite imagery and geolocation analysis. Social media platforms became flooded with videos of nighttime explosions, many authentic and others misleading, complicating public understanding of events. Cybersecurity researchers reported coordinated attempts to disrupt news distribution networks in several countries, suggesting that digital operations had become an integrated component of the confrontation. Despite ongoing attacks, neither side appeared to commit fully to unrestricted warfare. Military planners seemed focused on maintaining pressure while avoiding actions that could trigger irreversible escalation involving additional global powers. Yet with each new exchange, the margin for error narrowed. The continuous cycle of strike, retaliation, and counter-response created an environment in which even a single misinterpreted launch or unintended casualty could rapidly transform the situation. By the end of this phase, the conflict had evolved from an initial demonstration of force into a sustained regional crisis, defined by persistent bombardments, expanding fronts, and mounting international anxiety. What began as targeted military action had grown into a complex network of simultaneous engagements, stretching across borders, airspace, and digital systems. The world watched as both sides continued exchanging fire, aware that the next wave, whenever it came, could determine whether the confrontation stabilized or moved toward something far more dangerous. As the exchange of strikes continued into its later stages, the intensity of military activity settled into a dangerous rhythm rather than fading away. Instead of large, singular operations, both sides appeared to transition toward sustained pressure through repeated, smaller-scale attacks designed to maintain strategic exhaustion. Defense analysts monitoring the region observed near-constant aerial alerts across multiple countries, indicating that launch detections and interception attempts had become routine rather than exceptional events. Military aircraft remained airborne for extended patrol rotations, while naval forces adjusted positions almost daily, signaling preparation for rapid response rather than immediate escalation. Air defense systems across Israel reportedly intercepted several new waves of incoming projectiles during nighttime hours, forcing repeated shelter warnings for civilian populations. Authorities noted that many launches were aimed not at major cities, but at infrastructure nodes such as transportation corridors and logistical hubs supporting military mobilization. This shift suggested an evolving tactical objective, weakening operational continuity rather than delivering symbolic strikes. At the same time, regional observers recorded continued launch activity originating from dispersed locations,